Good afternoon, everybody. April the 22nd of 2016. George Wagner lived on Peterson Road, and that day started off like most days. He got up that morning, but there was one thing instantly that was off. Jake was up before him. Normally, George's tasks for the day are to feed the animals there on the farm. But before George could get to that, George knew he had one task that he had to do that day, and that was to disassemble a building, a wood shed, so to speak, close by his home. That was the one thing that he had to do. But before George could take off to do that, he noticed that Jake was off in that new barn up on that hill on Peterson Road. You folks went there, you walked up that hill, and you could look down on the house, that barn with the stalls. Jake was up there by himself. That's according to Jake. George eventually got ready to go disassemble that building, and Jake joined him. They went to that building, and when they got there, George realized he forgot his chainsaw, but they did as much work as they could do until they hit the point where they needed that chainsaw. And at that point, nothing seemed suspicious to George, although again it was off that Jake was already up that day, and usually Jake is the second to rise. While they were headed back home to Peterson Road, Jake's cell phone went off. There, the caller was Andrew Carson. Andrew Carson said, "Hello, Jake." And there he had a conversation. And that's when he thought he was the first to tell Jake that the mother of his child, Sophia, the child, that the mother, Hannah, had been murdered along with 6 of her relatives. At that point, Kenneth had not been found yet. Jake, according to Mr. Carson, put on an act worthy of an Academy Award. An act where he conned Carson into thinking that he was the first to tell him as he wept and cried on the phone, and that is the first time George learned about murders. They returned to the Peterson home, and thereafter, the Pike County Sheriff arrived at those scenes and requested help. He requested help from the Bureau, Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, what we refer to as BCI. After some time, BCI had narrowed down who they felt were suspects. In fact, it's worthy to note that BCI had interviewed Jake Wagner 4 times. In fact, the first interview was just 3 weeks after the murders. BCI, conducting their investigation, also felt it was important that they interview Angela Wagner, who they spoke to or interviewed on 3 occasions. 4. The third person that they felt that was important to talk to in the Wagner household was Billy. Billy Wagner. That's George's father. They spoke to BCI, spoke to Billy on 3 occasions. And, you know, on all of those occasions that BCI came around asking for cell phones, asking to speak with Jake, Angela, or Billy, George was right there. Not once did they ever ask to speak with George. He wasn't a suspect. In fact, George was only talked to 1 time. And the purpose of that 1 time is because BCI wanted to plant a bug or a listening device in their vehicle. And so let me tell you about that. George and his family were coming back from Alaska. They were coming here to Ohio to speak with BCI. This is their destination. But BCI caught them at the border there in Montana, a little town called Sweetgrass. There's a border crossing. And so their intent, BCI, was to put a listening device in the Wagner vehicle to try and gain more information. Naturally, they had to take all the occupants out of that vehicle and speak with them to take time so they could put those devices in their vehicle. So we had special agents, again with BCI, who had 4 different rooms where they spoke with all 4 family members. And George had an agent there speaking with him, a special agent, Special Agent Hageman. Special Agent Hageman was spot on, I would say. That interview with Special Agent Hageman was kind of mixed. In the beginning, it was accusatory, but he backpedaled some, and he told George, "Your family has big problems, George. Your family." Agent Hageman also told George, "Do you want to be a witness or do you want to be a suspect?" George knew his family had done a lot of bad things in their life, but he had never known of them to ever commit a crime of violence. He couldn't believe it. He denied it. He argued with them and...
I'm going to object and ask to approach, please.
Well, that's the first interruption of any of these opening statements, and it was by the state. Remember, this is the defense attorney. This is his chance to make opening statement. This is what I expect the evidence is going to show as an opening statement. And she said, "Can we please approach?" So we're not exactly sure the nature, but you can see them up there at the bench. And just a reminder for viewers who are joining us, this is the defense opening statement. It just started about, I don't know, 5 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago. Prior to that, the prosecution was wrapping up, had quite a long time for her opening statement. Was it too long or not from the expert's perspective? We will be bringing that to you. But you can see, and also just to point out, as you're wondering what happens in a courtroom, you can see the court reporter. She is the one in the periwinkle color jacket, just tapped the attorney, and she did that in order to tell the attorney, "I can't hear you," and this is on the record, and you have to make it so that I can hear you. There the judge is, who is hearing this case as well as he's having to make these decisions, and really a long sidebar following an opening statement objection. I don't know what they're doing or what they're going to decide. All right, I want to bring in now my guests for this hour. Here with me in the studio, my friends, criminal defense attorney Jack Rice and Josh Schiffer. Always great to have you both. We kept waiting because we thought they're going to end the sidebar. Well, they're going to end the sidebar. But all right, first of all, that's a long sidebar, and it's not typical. It's not good etiquette to interrupt. Josh.
Yeah, interrupting opening is pretty dangerous, and the jury's brand new and fresh. They're making first impressions, so it better be good. And with the length of this one, my initial suspicion is that something with a motion in limine or something that was fundamental got noticed, and that's why the prosecution got up.
Yeah, but
one second, Jack. Let me just...
That's how long this prosecution went. Their opening was 3 days long.
It was for, let me just comment, and I want to come back to you, Jack. They are leaving the courtroom. What that typically means is they're going back into chambers. How do I know that? Because when I was on the bench, I've told you, gentlemen, I like practicing that way. I would say, let's go deal with all this off the record, come back, put it on the record, but if there's something to straighten out, it's a really good way to get everybody to say transparently what's going on and then deal with it on the record. But finish your thought, because I want to compare and contrast just a little bit we've heard of the defense so far.
That's exactly where I wanted to go. I mean, how long was the prosecutor? 3 days long? I think it was like 3 days. And if you notice, there was all kinds of objectionable stuff there. Enormous amounts that the defense could have actually stood up and objected to. But frankly, when you have the prosecutor digging a hole, you know what you do? You get out of the way. And you clap and you go, "That's fantastic, dig some more, dig some more." And instead, what we see from the prosecution is we're 5 minutes in and you get this interruption. As a defense attorney, I am going to use that. I'm going to make sure the jury remembers that I sat back quietly for 3 days And all I'm trying to do is tell you what actually happened here.
And they're
It's
interrupting
really
me.
important. And they're interrupting me.
We talked about in the hallway, because I said there's so much stuff that could be objected to, and you said that. Hold on to that thought. Write it down. Keep a note. I'm sorry to do it. I know. They have a lot they want to say. But I know. We have to get back to a break. We're going to squeeze that in. When we come back, the sidebar is done. We certainly will continue our live coverage of the Ohio Family Massacre trial.
Tonight, on Closing Arguments, a deep dive into the Adelsons and the murder-for-hire plot of law professor Dan Markel.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Pike.
Ohio versus George Wagner, the case that we're bringing you where he is accused of murdering 8 family members in the Rhoden family. We want to get you back into the courtroom now. When we left, there was a sidebar during the opening statement by the defense. The attorneys and judge left the courtroom. Now, judge back on the bench. Let's go back to the courtroom.
Ready? The court will sustain the objection the prosecutor made. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the statements of either attorney in opening statement are not evidence. So you may continue your opening statement.
Thank you, Judge. So back to that interview room with Special Agent Hageman. He had just a few statements to make. A few questions. Do you want to be a witness or do you want to be a suspect? Then he said, if I don't know who did it, then you all go down for conspiracy. And so Hageman never received any information. And here George sits. If I don't hear who did it, you all go down for conspiracy. This is a trial about the state of Ohio against George Wagner. It's not the Wagners. It's not Billy Wagner. It's not Angela Wagner, nor is it Jake Wagner. This is all about George. I'm not going to take 5 hours to defend everything that Jake, Angela, and Billy did. This is a trial just about George. And so, as you hear the evidence in this case, you must ask yourself, every time you hear the Wagners, think of how that applies to George. Every time you hear they, a red flag should raise. Every time you hear them, every time you hear all of them, every time you hear Billy, Jake, or Angela. We're here to hear the evidence against George Wagner. There are certain things in life that we can't control. One of those things is our birth name. When we were brought into this world, we couldn't help who our parents were or are. And just like George cannot help that he was born into the Wagner family. The state wants to paint this with a broad paintbrush about the Wagners. Unfortunately, George cannot help that he's a Wagner. But that doesn't make him a murderer. As you hear the evidence in this case, there's 5 things I want you to pay attention to. The first is going to be what Jake says. Jake will tell you that George had nothing to do with the planning of these murders. Jake will tell you that George shot no one. Jake will tell you that George did nothing to destroy any evidence. That's the first thing. The second thing that I want you to pay attention to will be the credibility of Angela and Jake. The third thing that I want you to pay attention to is the incentives that were offered by the state of Ohio for such heinous crimes to Angela and Jake, to get them to talk, to get them to tell a story. The fourth thing is motive, because we know custody is not the motive. Everybody had a motive in this case to kill except for George. Angela had her delusions that were unfounded, that this child, Sophia, was being molested. And for that, she felt something had to be done. Jake, the evidence will be presented, was a very jealous and abusive young man towards Hannah. And you know what he couldn't stand is he couldn't stand that Hannah had moved on with her life, that she was with other men, and that enraged him. Angela had convinced him as well that Sophia was at risk of being molested, sexually abused, and Billy had his own motive. Billy was engaged in drugs. We've heard an awful lot about grow rooms. There were several grow rooms, and the drug activity is rife in this case. George had no motive to kill anybody in the Rhoden or Gilly family. And the fifth thing that I want you to pay attention to is how different George is from his family. So moving to that first thing, and that's the state's case. Their key witnesses, Jake and Angela Wagner. Jake has already spoke. In fact, he spoke in a room here with Agent Scheider. And you know what he said? He told Agent Scheider, he said, George had nothing to do with this plan. This plan was between me and my dad. We're the ones who planned this. My dad decided when it would happen, what equipment would be needed, and how it would be done. Jake didn't say anything about a vote. Billy had decided that he would tell his wife, Angela, certain tasks that had to be completed to perform these murders. He also told Jake certain things that needed to be done to commit these murders. But there will be no evidence that he told George to do anything to prepare for these murders. According to Jake, Billy decided the day, or would decide the day in which the murders would happen. Furthermore, Jake will tell you that George was not supposed to go. Billy picked the day that a drug deal was supposed to happen, or there would be a meeting to talk about a drug deal. George had nothing to do with drugs. You will hear no evidence of that. One of the tasks that Billy had for Jake was to acquire a vehicle that would be used in the commission of these murders. The other task that Billy had for Jake, and Jake will tell you that he and he alone made silencer for weapons, that was his task, that's what he did. He's already said that in a room with Agent Scheider. And you know, there's this hair, the coloring of the hair. According to Jake, he colored his hair. But Jake, the key witness for the state, will tell you that had nothing to do with murders. Jake will also tell you that this video, Boondock Saints, that he's the one who watched that before the murders. And a DVR, there was a DVR that was all burnt up. Jake was asked about that DVR, and according to Jake, he told you that DVR was destroyed so it wouldn't capture stolen vehicles entering and exiting that Peterson property. Billy had some tasks for Angela as well. Billy had told her, remember, that George had nothing to do with the planning, but the task for Angela was to acquire shoes. Billy also asked Angela to acquire a cell phone jammer. And the purpose of that is to block cell phone use, so it can't be used. So in the instance that somebody needed a call for help, they would be unable to do that. And Angela did acquire that cell phone jammer.
Richard Nash, that attorney, he laid out 5 things. Don't worry, we are hitting the pause button. You're not going to miss anything, but I have to take this opportunity. Still with me, Jack, Josh. Josh, let's start with you, because we were talking about how do you do this and what do you point out that's missing, and he said, I need you to listen to 5 things, jury.
Yeah, and it is the kind of defense like we talk about all the time. You really want jurors to listen. You want to make promises that are then fulfilled by the defense. That's exactly what he's doing. He's giving them what they need to look at while they listen to days and days of testimony. These 5 things are going to lead you to the conclusion that the defense wants at the end. I thought it was pretty well done.
And think of the comparison between what we saw from the state. What we have is 3 hours of mush. Honestly, you can't follow what it meant or
There's
what
no
you're
good story.
Yeah,
We
you don't
talk
know
about
what you're
that. You
actually
need a
to
story.
focus upon. Whereas in this case, I have 5 things. I can remember 5 things, and I'm going to be looking for those 5 things as it's introduced, and that's what you want this jury to be doing.
Especially with an uber complicated, many people being involved, stakeholder kind of case.
And here's what I would do in closing. You remember those 5 things I told you in opening?
Yeah.
Here, no motive, reasonable doubt. You heard Jake testify, George wasn't involved, reasonable doubt, right?
You're bookending this. You know what's coming,
I love it.
and it's there, and it's
That's
there.
it.
Follow.
Easy
They've
to
got the
follow.
notebook.
All
It's
right,
5
we're
things.
easy to follow because we all love talking about this stuff, but we need to squeeze in a break. We've paused the trial. As soon as we come back, we'll take you back into opening statements.
15% off your purchase.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott, honored to be with you this Monday afternoon. Was the Ohio family massacre the result of one family's plan to end a nasty child custody feud? Well, that's what the prosecution is alleging about the Wagners. Testimony began today, 6 years after the Rhoden family was found dead. The defendant, George Wagner IV. His defense is giving the opening statement. Testimony hasn't started. Opening statements are going first. We're going to go back in and pick up right where we left off.
And she did so, followed the orders, and that was to acquire a bug detector. And when I say bug detector, it's a device to determine whether there's any surveillance devices recording. Billy also told Jake the last task is you are to destroy these items. And Billy would dispose of the truck. George had nothing to do with disposing of this truck. Jake destroyed that evidence. Remember that morning when George woke up and Jake was up in that barn that you peeked into and you saw those stalls? Jake was up there alone. He was up there alone. He was destroying cell phones that he stole. He was destroying memory cards that were taken out of the Rhoden property so they could detect who was coming and going from that property. He was burning clothes. He was destroying silencers. And he was destroying weapons, specifically weapons that belonged to him and belonged to Billy. Jake and Jake alone dug a hole and buried that in that barn. George had nothing to do with that. And finally, and once again, Jake will tell you, George shot no one. And most importantly, there is no reliable evidence that George planned these murders. There's no independent, reliable evidence that George prepared for these murders. And there's certainly no reliable evidence that George shot anyone. That second thing I wanted to talk to you about is Jake and Angela, who are con artists and liars. We've already touched on it some, but Angela's the con artist through and through. You know, you're going to hear evidence that she burned her home on more than one occasion, committed arson, and then collected from her insurance company the proceeds on that. She started doing that when George was just 9 years old. Billy did the same with some vehicles. Billy's a professional thief. Jake took those traits from his mother and his father, all of those bad traits, and put it into one. They are a pair, and that's who the state has as their key witness. Con artists and liars. Jake and Angela fooled many people throughout this investigation, beginning with Mr. Carson on the phone. But you know what they did even after the murders? There's a child, if you remember, Hannah Rhoden had a newborn baby, and that newborn baby was named Kylie. It was Jake and Hannah who went together, and they brought Sophie over to the Gilly family, a family who they were responsible for taking their loved one, and acted as if nothing happened. That's the type of people that the state has selected as their key witnesses. Afterward, Jake went home and, at the direction of Angela, created a GoFundMe account to collect money, defraud people, to send him money so he could obtain custody of a child. The con didn't stop then. It's continued. It's who they are. The evidence will be that Jake and Angela have conned the state of Ohio here as well. They've conned the state of Ohio into the most heinous crime, into a 30-year sentence. In a sentence most deserving of death, he escapes with life. The plea deal is what I'm speaking of. Jake and Angela have conned the state of Ohio with the greatest goal in mind, perhaps the most remarkable plea deal possible. As the prosecution said, the loss of 8 innocent lives, the most deserving of the death penalty, and Jake gets to walk. Angela gets 30 years. They negotiated this plea agreement to save their life. Prior to making this plea agreement, they had reviewed all of the evidence in this case with their attorneys. And so it begs the question, why in the world would you grant such a gift to Jake and Angela to give them this in exchange, purchase that testimony? Well, it's simple, and it goes back to that last question that Hageman had. You're either a witness or you're a suspect. Because you see, there's no physical evidence George was at any of those murder scenes. There's no DNA, there's no prints, and BCI knew he had no motive. They knew that he was not involved in drugs. And you know, they knew they had only spoke with him one time, and that was for a reason. They have nothing on George. And because of that, that's a testament to the strength of their case for them to grant the deal that they've granted, and they were conned into the sentence that Angela and Jake have agreed. In order to avoid the death penalty, they must implicate George. Now, Angela gave a statement too, but what's really concerning about her story is she'll say that when everybody left to go commit murders, she went to sleep. She doesn't know what happened, and she woke up the next day and it was never discussed. How convenient. She has nothing to offer that would contradict Jake's statement, because according to her, she never talked about it afterward. They never talked about it, and she was sleeping while this all happened. So, Jake's confession. We know that there was evidence gained, and you heard about what was pulled out of that big pond, and you went there and you saw that pond, and there were some buckets that were pulled out of that pond. But, you know, Jake's statement really only implicates himself. There's nothing about Jake's statement that implicates George. Sure, he led him to weapons, but there is no independent, reliable evidence that George was involved in these murders. In fact, we believe the evidence will show that George could not have committed these murders. And it goes further. We believe the evidence will show that Jake, in fact, killed all 8. But he had to implicate his father in actually killing somebody. But the evidence will show that Jake killed all 8. The fourth thing I want to talk to you about is motive. George had his own life. He had his own son. He had everything going for him, and he had nothing against the Rhodens or the Gillies. He had no motive to kill any of these people. Everybody but George had a motive. Angela's motive was this unfounded imaginary threat of sexual abuse. She convinced Jake that it was a realistic threat. Jake was already in a jealous rage that Hannah had moved on with her life. And Angela had brought this concern to Billy. Angela's suggestion was, we should turn him into the police. We should turn him into police because that'll take care of Christopher Rhoden Sr. because of his drugs. That's what we should do. Well, remember what I said about Billy and his motive? That idea hit too close to home.
And we're going to pause the testimony there because I always love to bring in Jack Rice, Josh Schiffer, criminal defense attorneys, friends, colleagues here, offer a lot of fun.
You see us lean
but
forward?
I know
like,
I did.
We're
And I'm
like,
let's delay getting to them. No, but listen, we were just talking about this, and the reality is, how would you condense, if this was one of your cases, I want each of you to summarize the point of this opening statement for the defense. Josh first.
I really like what the defense is doing, but copying something Jack literally just said off camera, the 5 points
We'll come to you next.
need to be condensed so that they're easier to comprehend and code onto the front of your brain and keep this story moving. He's bordering on getting too slow, in my opinion, and those 5 reasons that he's going to put forth in the trial that he can then come back at the end of the trial and highlight again needed to be a little bit more boom, 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 boom.
Reasonable
boom.
doubt, reasonable doubt, reasonable doubt at closing.
Yeah,
Jack.
tight-knit family. That's what this is. You ride just above the herd, just above the fray, all of the evidence. You don't dip and dig down into it. This is about saying this is a tight-knit family. What the prosecution's going to do is they're trying to say because they were tight-knit, those who live together kill together? Is that the line we're going with?
And
because that's the argument.
Don't sell them that because that'd be a really good state line.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Jack's totally right that the state's going off of this one-for-all theory that if one brother had this issue with his child, mom was going to be involved, dad was going to be involved, other brother.
But here's
That's
the
not
problem
fair.
with both of these openings is it's very detail-oriented, and you know the devil's in the details. There's going to be at least one juror who's going to say, wait a minute, I remember the defense attorney during opening statement said ABC, and it could be a little detail, but they notice if you don't deliver what you say, the evidence is going to show you.
If you're going to do that and you're going to say, I have 5 things to tell you, 1, and you lay it out 1 paragraph, that's all you get. And the reason is because you want the jury to say, okay, I got that 1.
Yep.
2, and you might even say, this is what's coming, and you're going to see this. 1, and you laid out. 2, laid out. So when it comes, you want them to literally be leaning into it and say, when this witness comes, this is what you need to be looking for, right?
And you notice what all 3 of us do, trial skills, because we would do this in court as well. 1, no. 2, there was no motive for George. He was the only one who didn't have a motive. 3, I mean, you want to sell it to the jury.
The communication is a lot more than just words. You've got to have everything working together, the action, the visualization. By putting thoughts into action, it helps us remember them more firmly. So you do have to have that 1, 2, 3. And back to a point, I don't want to miss it. The promise that you just talked about, it's a little bit different from the defense from the prosecution. Remember, the prosecution carries that burden. If they're going to promise the 3 things you're going to see, you're absolutely right. A jury can be very nitpicky with, well, they kind of got number 2, but they didn't fully get it. That leads to an acquittal. The defense gets a little bit more wiggle room with, I'm going to show you these 5 things, but they're not carrying the burden, so they get a little bit of relaxation.
And it also is helpful to say, we got 5 things, we got 5 things. The jury might not even remember all 5, but they're going to know that there were 5.
Things.
And so they're kind of looking for them. And give them that.
Yep, and we've talked about the way I always prepared was I would write out every detail of what the evidence is going to show, and I would put it aside. Preparation is key in any work, but especially as a trial attorney. And then I would come back, and I'd read it and boil it down, and boil it down, and boil it down. And what would I end up with? A theme. This is what I want you to remember. And then I could boost some of the pieces, but not 18 pages. I know you're chomping at the bit, but I've got to take a break.
Come on, we can do
I know.
just a couple
We're going to take a break. When we come back on the other side, we're going to get you back into these opening statements by the defense attorney, in this case, Ohio versus Wagner.
It was a feud between families.
Came in like thieves in the night and took 8 lives.
George Wagner faces murder charges in connection with the killing.
It's a chilling story. The Ohio family massacre trial.
Live coverage today on Court TV.
528.
Opening statement, the time for the attorneys to tell the jury, this is what you're going to hear. And in this case, the defense is saying, and this is why George didn't do it. Let's go back into court.
That's what Billy said. The evidence will be that Billy, according to Angela, said, we must kill them. The idea was taken to Jake, and you know, Jake's idea was, again, his jealousy surfacing, said, we should do it, we should kill Hannah, but let's frame Hannah's boyfriend. Let's make it look like Corey Holdren did it. And once again, Billy said, no, that's not what we're doing. Once again, Billy's the one who created the plan. Jake went along with it. Angela went along with it. George had nothing to do with that plan. George had no motive, especially to kill who he considered his closest friends, Frankie Rhoden. You'll hear that Frankie Rhoden was one of George's closest friends. And Hannah Rhoden, you'll hear from many people, Hannah Rhoden was like a little sister to George. He had no reason to kill her. The last thing I want to tell you about is George is not like his mother, his father, or his brother. He's different from them. Sure, George was born into a family of con artists and thieves, but he never would have imagined that they would have committed crimes of violence. George disagreed with the way that his family lived their life. He disagreed with them so much he actually engaged in physical fistfights with his father. George disliked the way that family functioned so much, he was not part of them, that as soon as he could leave that home, as soon as he got his driver's license in 2006, and when he was 16 years old, he left. He ran away. That's what the evidence will show. But George, like most 16-year-olds, couldn't make it at 16. And so, unfortunately, he had to come back home. Although he came back home, he took every opportunity with his new license, newfound freedom, and he avoided that home as much as he could. He wasn't there. Any opportunity that he could leave, he was gone. George ended up marrying a young girl who we've heard about. Her name is Tabby. And Tabby come from a rough home. And George and Tabby had a child, and that child is George's world. It's a little boy. His name's Bullvine. Means everything to George. But, you know, they were too young. They got married too young, and eventually George and Tabby got a disillusion. But you know what the evidence is going to tell you? The evidence will tell you that Tabby's mother offered her money, offered to give her money to go hire an attorney. It was there. And Tabby said, no, I don't need an attorney. Tabby was given an agreement. It had everything spelled out about how this marriage would be dissolved, as well as custody of that little boy. Tabby reviewed it. She signed it. She went into a courtroom. She was questioned by a judge. Is this what you want to do? And she agreed. Which brings me back. Remember, we talked about Special Agent Hageman. When he spoke, he told George, you're an outsider. And he is. I don't see you as this type of guy. In fact, there was another officer there, and that officer said, you did things the right way with your child. Talking about the court system. And that's how George is not like his family. George is an outsider. George does not go along with what his family does, and he didn't do it on that night. George is not guilty of murder. And we believe when you've heard all of the evidence, you will agree George had no part in this murder and that you'll find him not guilty. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't promise that you'll always be done by 3:30, but and sometimes we may go till 5 o'clock, but tonight's not one of those times. What you've heard so far in this case is not evidence. However, it's a good bit to process, and so it seems to me that it's a good, meaningful breaking point right now. So we'll be adjourning here for the day and having you come back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. You'll be going home, and so it's important. It's important at all times, but especially since you're going home, and there's a natural tendency to want to unload or curiosity on the part of other people and this kind of thing. But these admonitions that the court gives you are extremely important for a fair trial, so you need to adhere to these. Again, do not discuss this case with anyone. You're not permitted to have this case discussed with you by anyone or have it discussed in your presence by anyone. You're not to form or express an opinion concerning this case until it's finally submitted to you.
Boy, do I like that Judge Deering. He's such a calm voice as he's telling this jury, you're going to go for the day, but remember, you can't talk about the case. Still with me, I do have Jack and Josh. And, you know, at the heart of this, we have 8 victims that they are alleging George was involved in their murder, and they range from 16 years old to 44 years old. So, of course, naturally, there's an empathy for these 8 victims. If you're the defense, how do you cut through that to say, because he never mentioned the victims, really. He never mentioned it's a horrible thing that happened. So are you able to cut through that to remind the jury that even though these 8 people died, guess what? He didn't do it. And let's see, I think we have a few, like 15 seconds each, Jack.
Yes, you have to. You have to embrace that and empathize with what that means for your family being charged with this, but also for those who lost their lives and why. If you don't do that, you're going to be seen as callous, uncaring, and potentially, dare I say it, guilty. You can't do that.
And they are focusing on he was different than his own family. Your thoughts, Josh?
I think the defense did a very good job cleaving him out of the family from the very beginning with 5 issues.
All right.